Welcome to Sleepy University, a place where history whispers and philosophy drifts through candlelight, where stories of the past are told softly, slowly, just enough to lull you into thought or sleep. Tonight, we begin with a secret of ancient Greece. Did you know that in ancient Greece, there existed a battalion composed entirely of men who loved other men? Not brothers, not comrades, not warriors united by duty, but lovers, male lovers, fighting side by side, sleeping side by side, and if needed, dying side by side. They were called the Sacred Band of Thebes, an elite military unit, feared by enemies, admired by allies. Why form an army of lovers? Because the Greeks believed that the strongest bond was not discipline or hierarchy, but love. A man, they said, would fight with more courage if the one beside him was someone he could not bear to lose. And so, they built an army on intimacy, on trust, on the trembling weight of love turned into steel. This wasn't a myth. It was real, documented, respected, and in a moment, we'll walk through history together, through dusty scrolls, battlefields, and buried tombs, to meet the men who once made love and war with equal devotion. Thebes, a city of stone and sunlight, lay at the heart of ancient Greece. Not as famous as Athens, not as mighty as Sparta, but proud, cultured, and quietly fierce. It was here, around the year 378 BCE, that the Sacred Band was formed. According to the historian Plutarch, the band was the idea of a general named Gorgidas, a man who understood something others did not. He believed that courage was not born in training grounds, but in the heart. So he selected 150 pairs of male lovers, 300 men in total, each pair bound not only by sword and shield, but by affection, loyalty, and something deeper. They trained together, ate together, laughed together, and yes, slept together. But this was not a scandal. In Thebes, it was a strategy. Their love was seen as a weapon. It was believed that a man in love would rather die than show weakness in front of his beloved, that two lovers would stand firm where strangers might run. And they did. For decades, the Sacred Band held their ground against stronger forces. They were disciplined, yes, but more than that, they were emotionally invincible, because each warrior carried more than a spear. He carried a promise, not to a city, not to a king, but to the man beside him. And in the chaos of war, that promise could become the difference between life and death. Thebes, a city of stone and sunlight, lay at the heart of ancient Greece. Not as famous as Athens, not as mighty as Sparta, but proud, cultured, and quietly fierce. It was here, around the year 378 BCE, that the Sacred Band was formed. According to the historian Plutarch, the band was the idea of a general named Gorgidas, a man who understood something others did not. He believed that courage was not born in training grounds, but in the heart. So he selected 150 pairs of male lovers, 300 men in total, each pair bound not only by sword and shield, but by affection, loyalty, and something deeper. They trained together, ate together, laughed together, and yes, slept together. But this was not a scandal. In Thebes, it was a strategy. Their love was seen as a weapon. It was believed that a man in love would rather die than show weakness in front of his beloved, that two lovers would stand firm where strangers might run, and they did. For decades, the Sacred Band held their ground against stronger forces. They were disciplined, yes, but more than that, they were emotionally invincible. Because each warrior carried more than a spear. He carried a promise, not to a city, not to a king, but to the man beside him. And in the chaos of war, that promise could become the difference between life and death. Several years had passed. Thebes still remained in the shadows, and Sparta, still considered invincible. But the Sacred Band kept training. Their strength grew, their bond deepened. Time moved on, and in 371 BCE, a moment arrived that would shift the balance of power in Greece. The setting, the plain of Leuctra. The Spartans marched in with their army, confident, as always, that they would win. On the other side, the Theban forces, and among them, the Sacred Band. 150 pairs, 300 hearts, beating in unison. Their leader was Pelopidas, a brave warrior, and according to some historians, a member of the band himself. But the true mastermind was Epaminondas, a strategist, a philosopher, a genius of tactics. He rewrote the rules of battle. Instead of a traditional phalanx, he formed a deep wedge, placing the Sacred Band on the left flank. Facing them, Sparta's elite. The battle began. Dust rose, shields clashed like thunder, and it was the Sacred Band who broke the line. They struck with precision, in rhythm, without mercy. They say not one of them retreated, not one fled. They fought as if defending not only their homeland, but their love. The Spartans were defeated, for the first time in decades. Greece now knew that Thebes had become a power, and that courage could be born not only of anger, but of devotion. After the victory at Leuctra, Thebes became the dominant power in Greece, and the Sacred Band was their secret weapon. They weren't ordinary soldiers. They trained together, lived together, and fought as if they were one body. They were respected. They were feared. People said, if you face the Sacred Band, you're facing a wall that never retreats. For decades, they didn't lose a single battle. But nothing lasts forever. In 338 BCE, Thebes faced a new threat. King Philip II of Macedon and his son, Alexander. The place of their final battle, Chaeronea. The Thebans stood their ground, but the forces were unequal. The Sacred Band took their place at the front once more. 300 warriors against thousands. They knew they would not survive, but they did not retreat. When the battle ended, Philip walked the battlefield and saw a mound of bodies. 300 bodies, lying side by side, pair by pair, shoulder to shoulder. He asked, "Who were these men?" And the answer came. That was the Sacred Band of Thebes. They say Philip wept. He saw not just soldiers, he saw devotion, he saw courage, and love. After the Battle of Chaeronea, where 300 warriors never stepped back, Thebes was crushed, and the Sacred Band was gone. But the memory remained. A few decades later, on that very same field where their bodies had once fallen, a monument was raised. A stone lion, massive, silent, staring toward the place where the Theban line once stood. Beneath the statue, a burial site. The bones of men laid to rest side by side, pair by pair. Centuries later, archaeologists found the remains of those 300 bodies. They lay close together, no ranks, no distinctions. Beside them, traces of funerary gifts, clay figurines, jars of wine, and gold, placed in the hands of the dead. It was not just a mass grave, it was a place of honor. And today, if you travel to Chaeronea, you can still see the lion. It still stands. And every year, on the anniversary of the battle, people come and lay flowers. They remember not only the bravery, but also that love can be strength.
that a union of souls can become a shield, and that even after thousands of years, we still seek stories where love was greater than fear.
Imagine a quiet evening in Greece, a hillside slope, stars above Chaeronea, and the figure of a lion in the dark, massive, motionless, like memory itself. You walk along a narrow path, between olive trees and dry grass. The wind carries the scent of dust and rosemary, and beneath your feet, the soil where once 300 hearts found rest. And now you stand still. You look up, at the stone face carved into eternity. No one speaks, and there is no need, because some feelings ask for no words, some bonds need no explanation, and some love becomes history. The Sacred Band is not just a myth. It is a reminder that courage and tenderness are not opposites, that a battle can be fought for a homeland and for the one standing beside you, that being in love does not make you weak, it makes you alive. Now, let your breath slow. You've heard what you needed. Let the story of Thebes wrap around you like a warm blanket. Let the silence carry the last of the words, and let sleep be gentle and long. Sweet dreams. And if you liked this lecture, come back to our channel. There's always room here for one more story and one more night. Subscribe, listen, sleep. If you're still with us, if sleep hasn't taken you just yet, we're ready to continue, because ahead lies a new story, a new silence, and a new revelation. Tonight, we'll go further, from the military camps of Thebes into the philosophical dreams of ancient Greece, where beneath the shade of marble columns, amid wine, songs, and quiet conversations, not only ideas were born, but feelings too. We'll talk about Plato, about his view on love, a very special kind of love, between men, how he described its nature, how Athens embraced what later became forbidden, and why, for the Greeks, this was not a scandal, but a form of beauty. Close your eyes, hear footsteps in the marble halls, where philosophers whispered and hearts beat loud. This will be a different story, quieter, more philosophical, but no less full of feeling. What is Eros? Imagine this: the sun slowly rising over the Acropolis. The shadows are still long, the air cool and still, and the city is just beginning to wake. You walk down a narrow street, past whitewashed walls and hanging grapevines. Ahead, the murmur of the marketplace, and just beyond, a stone staircase leading to the academy. There, among cypress trees and columns, men sit in light tunics. They speak not of politics, not of war. They speak of love, but not the kind a poet writes to a woman, not the kind a mother whispers to her child. They speak of Eros. So, what is Eros? To us today, it sounds like a name, the name of a Greek god of desire, with wings behind his back and arrows that awaken passion. But for Plato, Eros was not just a god. It was a force, a pulse, a thirst of the soul. In the Symposium, one of Plato's most famous dialogues, philosophers gather over wine, and each shares what love means to them. And Plato, through the voice of Socrates, says, Eros is not just desire for the body, it is a longing for beauty, for wisdom, for immortality through a touch of truth. He calls Eros the power that lifts a person upward, from the physical to the spiritual, from passion to contemplation. But why does he speak this way? Because in Athens, love between men was not only accepted, it was honored. It was part of education, part of formation, part of the path to wisdom. A young man, beautiful, pure, unspoiled, became the object of admiration, and the elder, philosopher, warrior, poet, showed him the way. He learned to love not just the body, but the soul. Plato does not call for lust. He calls for exalted love, for Eros, which becomes a ladder from earth to heaven. And as you hear this now, in the quiet, between inhale and exhale, you begin to feel this idea was revolutionary, something greater than desire, closer than friendship. Imagine Athens, the real Athens, with white columns, dusty roads, and fountains murmuring in the agora. Men sit in the shade of plane trees, discussing virtue and guiding the young. But why men? Why were they the heroes of these stories, and not women? The answer lies in the culture of the time. In ancient Athens, the man was seen as the embodiment of beauty, reason, and strength. He took part in the Olympics, in councils, and on the battlefield. Women remained at home. They bore children, spun wool, and stayed in the background. The center of the world was male. Even in the most enlightened circles, a woman was not a conversation partner. She was a mother, but not a philosopher. A wife, but not an equal. And so, for Plato, true love couldn't grow where there was no dialogue, no argument, no mutual growth. Love between men was seen as a bond between equals, a kind of spiritual mentorship. The older partner, experienced, wise, a warrior or a thinker, would take a young man under his wing. It wasn't just about the physical. Often, it wasn't physical at all. It was admiration, guidance, a path toward character formation. This kind of relationship was called paiderastia, not in the way we hear that word today, but as a respected form of moral and intellectual education. For the Greeks, it was a civic institution, a public, even honorable connection, one where both were meant to grow, one in virtue, the other in wisdom. Plato believed this was the kind of love that inspired the soul to reach for truth, that through admiring beauty in the body, the soul would begin to long for beauty with a capital B. Step by step, from the outer to the inner, from the physical to the eternal, Eros would be born, not lust, but a longing for the divine. This kind of love could be purely platonic, and that's not just a saying. It was a real connection in which emotion was seen as noble and affection worthy of a citizen. This system shaped an elite, warriors, philosophers, statesmen, those who governed Athens. And in that culture, ideas were born that we still study in universities today. This love was not hidden. It wasn't seen as shameful. It was visible, public. It inspired poets, educated leaders, and was seen as a path to truth. Imagine a warm afternoon in Athens. Shadows cast by marble columns fall across the square. Footsteps echo softly, and a teacher's voice drifts through the air, telling young men about justice and honor. Beside him, a young Ephebi, sword at his side, eyes bright, eager to understand. This is not just a student. This is a pupil in the truest Greek sense, one who is learning how to become a man. In ancient Greece, love and education were deeply intertwined. especially between an older and a younger man. This was called paiderastia, and it didn't carry the meaning that the word would later take on in Europe. It was a socially accepted and structured practice. A man, having reached maturity, could take a younger boy under his wing, not just as a teacher, but as a living example. He taught not only letters, but how to stand in formation, how to keep one's word, how to be a citizen. Such a bond might include physical attraction, but more often, it was something else, something formative. The youth's beauty was just the beginning. But Plato says, a true mentor must go beyond appearances. He must ascend through dialogue, shared time, reflections on virtue. In the Symposium, Socrates recounts the teachings of Diotima, a priestess who says, "He who first loves the body will later come to love the soul." And then, the very idea of beauty. It's like climbing a staircase, from first admiration to philosophical awakening. And in this context, love becomes not desire, but a school of the soul. The elder did not simply desire, he shaped. The younger did not simply follow, he blossomed. This kind of relationship was called kalikos, from kalos, meaning beautiful. It was physical, yes, but also friendly and deeply educational. To the Greeks, it was a path to perfection. Plato believed that only through this kind of connection could one reach an understanding of the eternal, of the divine. And within these bonds there was discipline, structure, expectation. It wasn't a whim. It was a rite of passage, subtle and deeply cultural. So when we hear these stories today, we can't apply modern judgment too quickly. We can't rush to condemn what was once held in high regard. Because for the ancient Greeks, love was something formative, not merely personal. It was part of the social order, the future of the city, the shape of the ideal. And now, in this quiet, perhaps you feel it too. That Eros is not just a feeling, it is a path, one that begins with admiration and leads toward truth. Ready to keep walking? Then in the next part, we'll explore why it was male love, in particular, that Plato saw as the most exalted form of all. Imagine this. Socrates, barefoot, a cup of wine in hand, sits in the shade of a column. He speaks not of gods, nor of rulers. He speaks of love, love between men, the kind we might not easily understand today. But in Athens, it wasn't strange. It wasn't sinful. It wasn't a weakness. For the philosopher, it was the norm. Education, growth, a connection of souls, not of bodies. Socrates and Plato saw it as a path to truth, to beauty, to the soul's immortality. And only later, with the rise of new religions, new morality, new language, Eros became something to be hidden. Plato's words remained in the books, but the feelings slipped away from life. And yet, centuries passed, and now we can hear it again, not as scandal, but as reminder that love can be wise and brave, that tenderness is not the enemy of strength, that the bond between two souls can itself be a philosophy. Plato gives us no verdict. He gives us an image, a ladder, from body to spirit, from youth to wisdom, from beauty to truth. And if you feel the quiet around you now, let it stay with you, like the echo of a dialogue, the whisper of history, a dream. Close your eyes. Feel the day gently fading away, your thoughts slowing down, ancient voices dissolving into the dark. Let Plato's philosophy cover you like a soft blanket, and let love be not a cause for worry, but a form of truth. Sweet dreams.
If you're still with us, and sleep hasn't taken you just yet, let's drift together to ancient Rome.
We're leaving the quiet gardens of Athens stepping into marble palaces that held stories no less deep. Because love between men did not live only in Plato's dialogues. It echoed in real life, in public, in the heart of the empire. Tonight, we'll tell two true stories, not myths, but moments recorded in history. They happened, and they remain. First, Hadrian and Antinous, an emperor and a youth, a silent love that survived even death. And then, Elagabalus, an emperor who called himself a woman in a man's body and openly searched for a husband. Two stories, two loves, two reflections of Eros upon the throne. Let's begin. Imagine imperial Rome at its peak. Marble arches, triumphal processions, and a silence heavy with power. Emperor Hadrian, one of the most educated and thoughtful rulers of his age. A lover of architecture, philosophy, Greek culture, and of a young man named Antinous. Antinous was born in Bithynia on the empire's eastern frontier. He was around 13 when he entered the imperial circle. By 16, he had become Hadrian's beloved, not in secret, not in shame, but in the tradition of ancient Greece, where the older partner, wise, powerful, guided the younger not just in affection, but in life itself. They were inseparable. They traveled together across the empire, hunted, worshipped, advised. It was more than physical, often something quieter, deeper, a tenderness, a mentorship, a soul-deep admiration. Hadrian did not hide this bond. He had coins minted with Antinous's face. He raised statues. He wrote poetry. He saw in the boy not just beauty, but something divine. Of course, there were whispers in the Senate, but Rome tolerated it because Hadrian was emperor and Antinous was unearthly to look at. Then, in the year 130, while traveling through Egypt, tragedy struck. Antinous drowned in the Nile. He was only 19. The death was sudden and remains a mystery. Some said it was an accident. Others, a ritual sacrifice given to prolong Hadrian's life. Whatever the truth, Hadrian was devastated. And he did something no emperor had ever done before. He deified his beloved, declared Antinous a god, built temples, established games and holidays in his honor, founded an entire city, Antinopolis. From Britain to Syria, his image appeared in statues and shrines. Antinous became a god of sorrow, a god of youth, beauty, and ideal love. Today, we see his face in museums, perfect features, still gaze, marble serenity. But behind that face is a story of love that dared to be seen, of loss turned into legend, of a heart, even in an emperor, that broke. After Antinous's death, Emperor Hadrian was shattered. He wasn't just grieving. He was in silent, profound mourning, the kind that needs no words, because it becomes action. He didn't just weep for the boy. He turned his love into a cult. Hadrian ordered the founding of a new city, Antinopolis, right on the spot where Antinous's body was carried ashore by the Nile. It wasn't just an act of remembrance, it was deification. Antinous was declared a god, youthful, beautiful, tragically lost. He became a symbol of eternal youth and love. Temples were built in his name, offerings were made. His image appeared on coins, in sculptures, on amulets. He became a new god of the Roman pantheon, not as a warrior, not as a sage, but as a beloved, a god born from love. Antinous was worshipped across the empire, in Greece, in Egypt, in Asia Minor, even in distant Britain. Priests honored him in sacred rites. Young men prayed to him for beauty, for love, for inspiration. And Hadrian kept building. Temples, columns, busts. He filled the world with the image of Antinous, as if trying to forget that he was gone. There was no shame in this cult, no secrecy. Hadrian didn't pretend. He didn't call Antinous his attendant or companion. He loved him, and he had the power to say it out loud. This wasn't myth. This was history. A love story that became eternal not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't hidden. Because an emperor, in the most vulnerable moment of his life, didn't turn away from his feelings. He made them sacred. And even today, though we no longer offer gifts in temples to Antinous, his gaze, carved in marble, still meets us from museum halls, silently, peacefully, as if to say, I was loved, and that was enough. If you're still awake, if your heart is still stirred by stories of love, let us go a little further. All of this was under Hadrian, an emperor who allowed himself to be vulnerable, who turned his love into a temple and left us memories etched in stone. But Rome did not stand still. Another time came, and another emperor, younger, bolder, more unsettling. His name, Elagabalus, or, as he came to be known, Elagabalus. He entered history not only as a ruler, but as a person who dared to say, I am a woman in a man's body, and I want to live as I feel. Now, we will tell his story, the story of an emperor who did not rule by law, but by the call of his heart. A story where love, the body, and power wove together into something dangerous and extraordinary. Imagine this. Rome, early 3rd century. The empire is still vast, but cracks are already running through the marble. Too much gold, too many gods, too much of everything. And then, a boy ascends the throne. He is only 14. He comes from Syria. His name is Varius Avitus Bassianus, but the world would remember him differently, as Elagabalus, a priest of the Eastern Sun, an emperor unlike any other. He brought his god to Rome, Elagabal, a solar deity from Emesa. But along with his god, he brought his own ideas of freedom, of the body, of love. Elagabalus wore eye makeup, dressed in gowns, appeared at banquets in silk and sandals. He said he felt like a woman, and sought not a wife, but a man who would call him Empress. His contemporaries were shocked, historians outraged. Later, they would call him a monster, a pervert, an enemy of Roman morals. But what if we looked differently? What if he wasn't just eccentric, but brave? What if, inside this delicate teenager, lived a soul that refused to lie to the world? He openly took men as husbands. He didn't hide his feelings. He said, I want to have a vagina. I beg the doctors to make me one. This wasn't the 21st century. This was Rome, where not long ago they crucified for belief. And now, a boy emperor was asking to be himself. He was no philosopher. He didn't seek immortality through truth. But he lived honestly. And though Rome did not accept him, history preserved his voice. He ruled for only 4 years, but Rome remembered them forever. Elagabalus didn't just break laws. He played with society's most sacred beliefs. He wasn't just a young man in women's clothing. He called himself a wife, asked to be called a lady, gave orders with painted eyes and a rose in his hair. His lover was a man named Heracles, an athlete, a chariot driver, a simple man of the people, strong, rough, and the emperor's beloved. Elagabalus adored him, seated him beside him at feasts, called him husband, grew jealous. Once, he caught Heracles looking at another and threw a fit. Not like an emperor, but like a human being. Rome laughed. The Senate was outraged. But for him, it was love. He didn't hide. He didn't play roles. He shattered the very idea of what it meant to be a man, to be powerful, to be proper. Of course, his reign wasn't just about love. He made mistakes, luxury, instability, disrespect for tradition, changing religious rites. But hadn't other emperors sinned the same? The difference was, he didn't hide who he was. He felt no shame for what others concealed in their chambers. Elagabalus became a mirror, and Rome didn't want to look. At 16, he was killed, in a crowd, in broad daylight, soldiers bribed by family, his body thrown into the Tiber. He was simply too different. But centuries later, his story lives again, in archives, on stages, in books, and in our quiet conversations. Perhaps he wasn't a saint, and maybe not great, but he was real, a boy who just wanted to be himself, in a world where that was impossible. If you're still with us, if you haven't drifted off, or maybe just woke up again, thank you for walking this path with us. We began with myths, but we quickly realized reality is just as extraordinary. We stood with the lovers of Thebes, where love defended cities. We sat in Plato's academy, where Eros climbed from earth to stars. We followed Roman emperors, one who turned his love into a cult, and one who dared to live as he truly felt. These weren't stories from fantasy. They weren't romantic daydreams. They were chronicles, fragments of truth, pieces of love that once existed and still echo in the human heart. Because love asks for no permission. It simply arrives, sometimes from the steps of a senate, sometimes on the battlefield, sometimes in verses, letters, or quiet conversations beneath stone arches. We told just a few stories, but there are more, so many more. And maybe, someday, we'll return to them. But for now, close your eyes. Let these voices settle deep inside. Let only silence remain, and the soft echo of ancient feeling. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tap the bell icon so you won't miss what's next. And if you feel like it, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what stirred your heart. Thank you for being here. Good night, and until the next story.